Thanks so much for joining me today. We are going to dive into the conversation in a moment. First, I wanted to remind you that the show notes and links mentioned on this podcast are on my website at lizasivekmarketing.com. That's Liza with a Z and Civic with an S. So, okay, let's get started.
Hello, magicians. I am back here today with the Monster Season podcast. I'm very excited about this one because I have Cindy Wolfe Boynton on today, who is an author, a journalist, and most importantly, she owns the Spirits of Milford Ghost Walk in Milford, Connecticut. And this is a lot of fun if you're in that area visiting or live there. It's where my old stomping grounds were before I moved recently. And it's an old colonial town. I guess that's redundant, right? Old colonial, not a new colonial town. It's an old colonial town with an E, O-L-D-E. And we're going to talk about all the history and all the spooky things that she's come across. And she has a really good background for doing this because she's an amazing storyteller. And one of the best references I can give you is she's put up with me since kindergarten. So, hello,
It's
Cindy.
been easy. Hello, Liza. It's been so easy to put up with you.
Well, that's just because you're used to me now. But yeah, we're stuck with each other. Doesn't matter what happens in our lives. We always come back
You got that.
to being friends, right? So, Spirits of Milford Ghost Walk. If I had looked back when you were young and I was young and we wanted to be writers, and I would never have thought you were going to start doing ghost tours and tarot readings. That would have not been on the list of things I think Cindy's going to do when we grow up. Definitely storyteller, definitely writer, but it just shows how opportunities come up in our life, and you have really grabbed this one and made it amazing. People talk about this all the time. You're doing wonderful stuff on your website, talking about the reviews and what you talk about. And, you're just doing an awesome job with this. And I've been on this tour, obviously, a couple of times. I recommend it to everyone. It's a lot of fun. So tell me a little bit about, I know, but tell me a little bit for our listeners about how you came to this, how this became something you do.
Well, first of all, thank you for all of those wonderful words. And I honestly never in a million years did I would ever expect to become the ghost lady of Milford. That was not one of my aspirations, but it is one that I absolutely embrace wholeheartedly now. So as you mentioned, I've been a journalist for most of my life. I've been fortunate to write for papers with as broad a scope as the New York Times, but also with as local a scope, hyper local in fact, for the former Milford Citizen. And working for the Milford Citizen, which was a daily newspaper, I really got to know the Milford community. And one of the amazing things about community journalism is that it is so intimate and it's so personal. And so I heard so many stories growing up, spent so much time getting to know the people of Milford. And as you said, Milford is so old, O-L-D-E, 1639. We were founded by the Reverend Peter Pruden, who actually walked here from New Haven following the Native American paths. I heard a lot of ghost stories. We have houses in Milford, many homes that were actually built by the founding families and have never been sold. They've just been passed on from generation to generation. So it's if one of the things that tends to make a place haunted is age, there are few places in Connecticut that are as old and have as much history as Milford. And the ghost walks came about, primarily because when my kids were growing up, they're in their 20s now, but when they were little, my oldest son especially liked to watch all the ghost shows on TV. And whenever we went on a family vacation, we would take a ghost walk. And as we were taking these ghost walks, we would always talk about how Milford should have a ghost walk. So when oldest son decided to transfer college into Lower Manhattan, where cereal costs $8 a box, I had to
Oh,
figure out how exactly I was going to pay to keep him fed and living in Lower Manhattan. So that was 2014. And so I said, well, let me give these ghost walks a try. We had talked about them for years. And I am so fortunate that they just took off from there. Those first couple of years, I was just doing them in the fall. Now we do them pretty much year round. Last year, I hired a second guide, and in our 8th year, we are doing amazing. And I have to tell you, I love it. Ghost walkers are the nicest people, and they're always out to have a good time. And sometimes I get some of my best stories from my ghost walkers. So it's like a win-win.
one of the things I loved on that, and you just told me something I didn't know. I didn't know that you started it partially because your son had moved to Manhattan, because I remember doing that. One of the things I loved about the ghost walk when I went on it with you was I heard stories I would never have guessed about, but also because people would say, oh, I lived in that house, or, oh, that's my aunt's house, or, oh, I used to rent an apartment at that house. And you would just say right to them, and is that story true? And they'd say, yes, we've seen that. We've seen those happen, or we've heard those stories. You're not making things up and saying, okay, maybe no one will notice. You're not, coming up with historical things and embellishing them incredibly. You're coming up with real stories that people have reported or that you've seen, in the newspaper or what have you. And I think that's just amazing. And now every time I go by certain houses, wasn't it the Chamber of Commerce that, they had no power, but one light kept staying on? I can't go by that building. And I know it's not the chamber anymore, but I can't go by that building. I'm thinking about that now. And I've looked at that building since I was in kindergarten, because again, I lived in that area all this time until 3 years ago. And every time I go by that building, I'm like, oh, now I know it's haunted.
Right?
So,
It's a great
yeah.
story.
And the architect, I just found out, who did that, which was originally a library, also did quite a bit of architecture up here in New London. So there's a lot of connections about, between all these towns, and there's a lot of age, as you said. So when you do the walks, you talk about a lot of things. One of my favorite is that Charles Island, the island off of Gulf Beach, is cursed. 3 different curses, including one made by Captain Kidd, supposedly. Captain Kidd has highly inspired our town. We even have a pirate day now, and an oyster festival, which is pretty famous. But Captain Kidd was supposedly in Milford on that island. So there's a lot of history, legendary or not, there. And I know that some of this storytelling about the ghost stories came from the fact that your parents are very involved with the Historical Society in Milford. Your late parents were, wasn't your dad, didn't he dress up as, was it Benjamin Franklin or something? And it was a docent in character?
Both my parents would regularly dress up in colonial garb. In fact, I have wonderful pictures that I love to look at. And it's funny, I really grew up at the Historical Society. My parents would bring me with them whenever they would act as docents, and we would always have to go to their different events and picnics. And when I was young, I would complain, oh, I hate history. I'm never going to like history when I grow up. And, now I live and breathe it. So, and I thank my parents very much for dragging me along.
They get to us subliminally, don't they? Yeah, I've done that to my children, I think, too. So they say once in a while, I hear your voice in my head talking about these things.
Exactly.
Yes. Your parents were so involved in the community, like yourself, and so involved in the Historical Society. And they were really part of that group that kept it going when we were young, at a time that it might have just, you didn't have interest in that kind of a thing in a town. It just fizzles out. And they had some really dedicated people, and still do, I understand. And it's a great historical society.
And my dad was also a big influence in me thinking about the paranormal as well. So my mom was a non-believer in spirits or ghosts of any kind, but my dad really did believe. And many times in his life, He felt that he had either visions of some kind. For example, one day when he was young, he woke up out of a sound sleep, sure that his grandmother and grandfather were dead, and that they had burned up in a fire, and they had lived just a few blocks away. So my dad got out of bed. He ran through what then were woods to his grandparents' house, and it turned out that there was a fire in the house, but he got his grandparents, he woke them up and got them out in time. And then after his dad died, his dad was a fiddler, actually in World War I. He was in the Navy and he was part of the Naval Orchestra. But after my granddad died, my father would talk about seeing his spirit, and often he was playing the fiddle. So we would talk about that a lot. My dad was very open-minded.
Wow, that's really amazing. I could totally see that. I could totally see him having that kind of open-mindedness. He was a great, great guy. And I could also see your mother going, nope, didn't happen, because
Oh yeah, no.
she was also wonderful, but she was not a believer, right?
No.
So tell me a little bit about how these walks get marketed, since we're on marketing myths and magic. Tell us a little bit about how you started marketing this locally. You had a lot of community connections. You have a lot of community connections still. And this was something nobody else was doing in downtown Milford. So how did you get this? How'd you get the word out, and how do you do it now?
So yeah, there's a couple of ghost walks in Connecticut. There's one in Mystic, there's one in New Haven. Those are the other ones besides Spirits of Milford that go on regularly. There's a couple of others that take place in very old towns and at historical societies just at Halloween time. So I really tried from the start to market it as, something for anyone, for any age, at any time. I made sure, first of all, the walk itself, that it was spooky and not scary. I didn't want it to be something that people would have, someone jump out at them, because I don't think that's very fun. But I turned to the internet, right? Where else do we turn? We turn to the internet, we turn to social media. And primarily, right from day one, that has been where my marketing has been. I have a robust website. I have a robust Facebook presence. And on my social media accounts, which include Twitter and Instagram, I try to provide my audience with not just blatant PR, come to the Ghost Walk on Friday night. I also try to give people interesting information about the paranormal, right? So sometimes I do definitions of paranormal terms. Sometimes I'll tell part of a story. I've collected stories that I can never use as part of my ghost walk, because my ghost walk would be 17 hours long. So, I might blog about those, or I might write about them. On my Facebook page. I'm trying to build a community. So I think it's the marketing is by giving people more. They're giving them a context rather than just, content about the walk itself. The other form of marketing I do primarily is I have rack cards, which I give out everywhere. I have them in many of the rest stops. I am an official partner with the Connecticut Department of Tourism, because I feel that that's a really important partner to have, and I use all kinds of online calendars. I've partnered with different haunted house guides around New England as well. But a lot of it is word of mouth. I go to a lot of community events with my rack cards, and I shake people's hands and say, hey, want to go on a ghost walk? And give out discount coupons as well.
So tell us what a rack card is.
So a rack card is a tall, skinny postcard that's more like a rectangle, that basically, gives the who, what, where, how, when, why about a business. It's what you find in rest stops and hotels in those big plastic racks that are hanging on the walls.
Right, the ones that you come out of the elevator into the lobby and it's just a bunch of things you can do in the area, right? So
Exactly.
it's right there. So when someone is visiting Milford, and Milford has a big tourism demographic. We have people come over from Long Island in their boats. We have people, like I still live there. As far as I'm concerned, I'm still a Milfordite, even though I'm in my new adopted hometown of Colchester. So the people come over to their boats. People come from New York. The train is right there. It's what, an hour and 20 minutes from Manhattan. So we do have people come in the summer for things. And yeah, I can see how that would be a really good way to get the word out, because people are going to pick those up and talk about it and think about coming and tell other people. And I know your reviews and your word of mouth are fantastic because you do such a good job. You can see them on her website. Everybody loves this. And
well, why people love it?
It's not a lot. Yeah.
And I think people love it because I love it. You can't be in this kind of business and be a guide. There are people, my ghost walkers are only going to have a good time if I have a good time, right? If I'm in a pissy mood, then everybody's going to be in a pissy mood. So, I psych myself up for every single walk. I really do have a good time as well. And I think that's important, that the energy be really positive. And so my rack cards, my website, my social media posts, everything I do that's Spirits of Milford related, I try to make sure all have that really positive energy vibe. You look at some marketing materials for haunted houses and things, and they're bloody and they're scary. And, that's not what Spirits of Milford Ghost Walks is all about, right? We're about good energy, great stories, learning from the past to help us move forward. So it's all good.
I'd like to just mention here for the grown-ups, that doesn't mean this is not got some really good stories. Okay. There's some really good stories in here. It's just not people jumping out at you. This is not.
Oh no, I'll freak you out.
Friendly. Oh yeah. I want to make
I'll freak you out. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not going to say anything, but there was that funeral home director, the Pawcatuck Indian that you mentioned on your website. Yeah. There's some freaky stuff that I did not know. So yeah, a lot of fun, whether you believe or not, it's just a lot of fun. And what's great is that you give it historical context, and your marketing is more historical, antique, vintage kinds of pictures, not, so again, spooky, scary, but not just, ooh, you're going to have a bloody good time. It's not like that. And I think that sets you apart quite a bit, because people do know that they can come with family members, with friends that might not want to walk through the haunted house where people jump out at you and grab your shoulder, because those are the people I smack in the face, unfortunately, accidentally. So we don't do that. Yeah, I don't do haunted houses. So tell us, can you tell us one of the stories, just to tease this a little? You got a story you can share with us from your walk?
Sure. I'll tell you one short story. So one of our stops is the Milford Historical Society, where there are 3 houses: the Stockade House, the Eel Stowe House, and the Brian Downs House. We don't go on the Historical Society property. We stand across the street. And one of the ghosts that I talk about is that of Stephen Stowe, who was one of the original inhabitants of the Eel Stowe House. So back in the Revolutionary War, there were quite a few British ships that were in Milford Harbor. And one of them was carrying American POWs. Well, among those POWs, there was an outbreak of smallpox. So the British captain said, we have to get rid of these sick POWs before our own men get infected. So he made the decision to drop them at what's now Gulf Beach. And there's actually a plaque right there that says, this is the spot where these sick soldiers were dropped. Well, Stephen Stowe, he was a captain in the militia. He was not a doctor, but he very much believed that if these young men were willing to die to fight for our new country, then we should be willing to die to help nurse them back to health. So he led the efforts in Milford to do that. Unfortunately, many of the men died, and Stephen Stowe died as well of smallpox. But apparently, he liked his house so much that he decided to go back to it. And the reason we say that is because on a couple of different occasions, there were photographs of what clearly show the outline of a shadow man. And on one of those occasions, when a photograph was captured, we also got an EVP audio recording of when the question was asked, "Stephen Stowe, are you here?" A man's voice very clearly says, "Yes, it's me."
Ooh, my goodness. We need to get you like a ghost show. That's amazing. Yes, I remember that story. And that is a very big historical moment in Milford history. That's like even in revolutionary history, that's a big, big moment when they dropped them off in Milford. And he did sacrifice himself. That's at the Historical Society. Actually, they talk about that. But knowing that he just didn't want to leave, he wanted to stay with his house and his community, he might still be there.
Well,
he is.
you know, paranormal experts talk about the different things that cause spirits to stay. You know, what makes someone want to have their soul energy stay in a certain location, and often it's because it's the place that they loved most, right? And for many of us, our homes are the places that we love most.
That's right. He wanted to go back to his house, maybe his family. That's right. So that's pretty, okay, I got a little bit of goosebumps, even though I've heard that story before. So that's just a taste of what she does on her walks. So that really shows you there's historical context, there's little spookiness, and she can point out that house and say, there it is, right there. So we have a lot of things that have changed in the last couple of years. Obviously, COVID took a hit on things. Were you able to still do any walks during that time?
So there was an extensive period where no, we couldn't do any walks. You know, because of what the laws were in the state at that time, but we were eventually able to go back. And actually, because outdoor activities with a limited number of participants was one of the first things that people were able to do again, I actually had to hire a second person because the demand for ghost walks was just so great. You know, it was one of the few things that people could do. You know, there's also the fact that I am almost 54. And while that's not old by any means, you know, during the peak season, where I was typically giving 2 to 3 walks a night, which would equal 6 walks a weekend, it just was exhausting. And by the second walk on Saturday, I couldn't remember what stories I hadn't told and what I hadn't said. By Sunday, I was so dead that I could barely go to my real job on Monday morning. And, you know, like I said before, if your ghost walker isn't having, your ghost leader isn't having a fabulous time and is at the top of her game, then no one is going to have a great time. So I ended up hiring this remarkable young woman who was a theater major in college, and she and I now alternate walks. So it has been an incredible addition to have Emma with us. And actually, little plug for Emma, when she was in high school, she was a volunteer at the Milford Historical Society. So she brings a whole new dimension to the ghost walks, and that she has her own personal stories to tell about things that she experienced there, as well as, you know, other locations in downtown Milford. So that's been really great.
What a great opportunity. That's wonderful. Yeah, she sounds like a great addition. I have not met her yet. Now I'll have to schedule a walk to hear her stories.
And I have to say, you asked about marketing before. I make an ask at the end of every single walk. If you had a good time, please tell your friends and family to come. Here's when the next walks are. Here's how long they're going to last this year. And I think that's very, very important. A lot of the feedback that I get is people saying, hey, cousin Sue came on this walk, or my friend Harry, and that's what made me come. So word of mouth, having a positive experience is key to my marketing. We can't have a bad day, right? Because we want people to go and tell one person about it.
Well, this is a service industry that you're in. It's a service and entertainment industry. It overlaps a lot of things. It's certainly not a dead industry. Sorry, I've been saving that one. So, haha, just the people you visit, not the people that you have hired. So, listen, you got to get the corny joke in there somewhere, right? So we have a lot of historical events in historical buildings, as you said, in Milford. A lot more have survived in the same families than, to my knowledge, I don't have any numbers, maybe you do, than any of the surrounding towns. It's not like all the historical houses in New Haven still have the original owners. They're all like law offices now, apartment buildings. And we have some of that because, there's only so many you can keep in a family. But yes, a lot of what you walk through is still owned by the same family or has been kept historically accurate by the new owners because it's in the historical district or it's protected, right? And that's a big deal. Historical Society has been a big part of that too. So that really gives you that sense. It's kind of like walking around Salem, although they've knocked down the prison and the Ouija board factory now for condos. But it's kind of like walking around Salem. Like, these are the real places, But what's nice is that Milford is not commercialized that way. Now, you've also written a couple of books about spooky topics, haven't you?
I have. I am the author of a book about Connecticut's witch trials, which was published in 2014. A lot of people don't know that Connecticut had witch trials 50 years before Salem did. So that book, called Connecticut Witch Trials, First Panic in the New World, that talks about, it tells the stories related to that. And it was actually a really hard book to write because there is no one receptacle in Connecticut for its witch trials history. And writing that book was really about piecing together little bits of information to try to tell the complete story. So I love that book. I'm very proud of it. And this year, I have a new book that was released in early September called Conjuring the Devil, my terrifying experience working with paranormal investigators Ed and Lorraine Warren on the Devil Made Me Do It case. And I'm very excited about that book as well. I worked with Ed and Lorraine for a short time during the mid-1980s. And it was honestly the most terrifying experience of my life. And it's taken me 30 years to write about it. But I'm so glad that I finally did, because really it was, it really was an exorcism of some kind, like a releasing of the story that had been bottled up in me so long that I had told bits and pieces about over the years, but I never told the whole thing from beginning to end, not even to myself, because so much of it was just so surreal. And at the time, I didn't really know what was really happening and what I might be making up. So what my imagination was doing rather than, making up. So writing it was very cathartic, and it's turned out to be a great book. Whereas my ghost walks are not scary. This book is scary.
This book is terrifying. I remember, this is not just you talking about a book you wrote when you say that you were scared. I remember when you tried working with them and how terrified you were. And you didn't say a lot about it, but you told me about the nightmares, and you told me that, that was something you just did not expect. And you're like, all right, something's going on here.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Obviously interested in reading this book and finding out everything that happened with you. Have you talked, do did you talk to Lorraine recently? She's still with us, correct? I know Ed is.
No, actually, Lorraine died a year or so ago,
Oh, she did.
and I have not spoken with them since early 1987, since the day that I walked away. The few years after that, I was actually so traumatized that I made a real effort not even to be in the same city as they were. So, for example, I was taking classes at Southern Connecticut State University where they would visit every October. If I knew they were coming that day, I would not even be there because I just had to, I just had to be as far away from them as possible. So over the years, it got better, and I learned a lot over the years. I'm really fascinated in the supernatural and unexplainable and the paranormal. I'm very spiritualism is something I've always been really, really interested in. You know, this idea of, is there life after death? Is there a heaven? Is there a hell? As an academic, because I'm a college professor as well, you know, these are all things that I've studied a lot. And as I learned more, I was able to process my own feelings and story a little bit more, which brought me to a good place where I could finally write this book. But, you know, knowledge is power, and there were a lot of years of uncertainty and fear.
So some distance has helped give you that buffer and you're able to finally process it, or was it just all that studying?
It's a little mix of both. You know, I think that when we're just using our imaginations, or when we're following unsubstantiated beliefs, things that we think might be true but we don't really know are true, then you know, that can take our minds in lots of different places. But studying, talking to experts, you know, reading a lot of books, both new and extremely old, was very helpful to me. And I have to say, I do believe that, you know, what happened to me back in the 80s working with them was supernatural and had a real scary paranormal element. And it taught me the difference between dabbling in the occult and telling stories about the occult. I think they're two different things. And so I have really focused on being a storyteller and an educator.
Which is something you've always been, always. That's something you've always liked to do as a storyteller and an educator for many years. And that's the perfect background for this. It's a perfect background for what you're doing now, I think. So it's kind of come full circle. And I'm glad to hear you were able to process that incredibly terrifying experience. And now I'm not sure I want to read the book, but I will in little teeny tiny doses during the day in a locked room. Okay, so where can people find you? How can people sign up for, I know your website, of course, is at spiritsofmilford.com. And where else can they find you on Instagram and Twitter?
So Spirits of Milford Spirits, actually. Milford Spirits on Instagram, Milford Spirits on Twitter, Milford Spirits with a little @ in front of it, on Facebook as well. But if you go to our website, which, as you said, is spiritsofmilford.com, you can access everything. You can click to get to all of our different places. And there's also a link for upcoming walks where you can click on the walk and pick your desired date.
Yeah, there's a long list of dates, which is great. There's a lot.
But they're going to go fast, and it's almost prime season. It is prime season. It is prime season.
Monster season, as my husband calls it. It's monster season. So yes, we definitely want everyone to grab their space now. And you do private walks too for groups, but you have to.
I do 10 or more. 10 or more. We do private walks, and those are super fun too.
Yeah. So everybody go check this out. Everybody check the spiritsofmilford.com website out and see what she does, and also the books. And you can contact her through all those places, I'm sure. And tarot readings, you can get a tarot reading too. So if you want to know more about, what ghost is following you around, maybe, I don't know if the tarot does that, but it's a possibility, I guess. Right?
The cards know all.
The cards know all. Okay, so that's good to know. I'm staying away from those cards then. The book is enough. So we're about to wrap up here. So is there anything else that you have for advice for someone who wants to start a small local business?
Know your community. Know what your competition is, if any. Know what your audience is going to want, right? Like, why do they need your business? What are they going to get from it? And believe in it 100%. I believe you got to give it your all, right? It's got to mean everything to you. So, and then
don't do it for the money.
Don't do it for the money. The money will come, right? There's all different kinds of success. There are all different kinds of profit. And I think the joy component is a big one too. And, if you do well, you get to have frighteningly great interviews like this one today with Liza.
That's right. So we will definitely be watching this. We're definitely going to be watching for that book. And that, you said that came out in early September. What's
Yes.
that called again?
Yes, it came out in early September. Conjuring the Devil, my terrifying experience working with Ed and Lorraine Warren on the Devil Made Me Do It case.
My goodness, there's a lot of devil words in there.
Yeah.
So awesome. All right, so everybody go check that out. Follow her on social media and learn about the walks. I think you won't be disappointed if you're in the New York, New Haven, Boston area and you're down in the Milford area visiting. That's a really great thing to do. And for everybody else, those books are out and available. So go check them out. And Cindy, thanks so much for joining me today.
Well, thank you. This was amazing.
All right, we'll see you all next time.
Wow, another fantastic conversation done. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Don't forget that all the links mentioned will be in the show notes at lizasivekmarketing.com. And while you're there, if you're a business owner whose marketing is on life support, check out the Your Virtual Marketing Department offer and take the Marketing Health Report quiz for free. For less than the cost of a full-time hire, we can take your marketing from frustrating to lead generating with an entire marketing team. So check that out, and I'll see you next time.
You've been listening to Marketing Myths and Magic, part of the Exvadio Podcast Network. You can find us at exvadio.com/podcasts, as well as the Apple Podcasts app, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, and wherever you find podcasts.